Hello and welcome to Beyond the Margins. I'm your host, Jason. This is my friend, Natalie. Natalie, I'm so glad to have you here today. We've talked a little bit and I've gotten to know you a little bit. I'm so glad that I get to share you with everybody else that gets to see our video now. I'm just going to sit back right now because what I'd like to do is let you just tell your story.
Okay. It is kind of a complicated story. I think the major themes in my life are, on one hand, I grew up with childhood abuse. And on the other hand, I'm born in Germany. I'm originally German Croatian. And so I had always a little bit different experience of society. And so I tried to avoid counseling and these kind of things initially because there was a lot of stigma in my own family. And I knew I had work to do, but also I didn't trust the system to really do the work. And so there was a major turning point in my early 30s when a relationship ended. And I really said to myself, okay, I want to have healthy relationships in my life. And I also want to be a healthy parent. So I moved from Germany to Spain and I did a lot of my own healing. And so in Spain, also, I was in a circle of friends that was very much into social justice. And so I was naturally drawn to some sort of things, just also because I think because of my own intersectionality, I was aware of systemic injustices. So in Spain, there was a huge, profound inner journey. And there was a profound journey in speaking up, understanding global dynamics. Like we did a project with indigenous people in Guatemala when I was living in Spain. And so it really also showed me what's happening around indigenous cultures in our world. And so I did a lot of change there. Apart from my own healing, I got trained in systemic constellations, in systemic coaching, and I started to work as a coach. And then the big question I always had in my life, when it came to gender, where do I fit in? So I would say, despite the toxicity of my family, they never were very much imposing onto me. And German language is different. So in German, we have three genders. We have male, female, and it. And I think just because the language gave me this option, I internally identified mostly with it. And I wasn't aware that people were different. So I projected onto men and women, they experience gender as I, because if people don't tell me, I don't know. And so then when I started my healing journey, I did some of these personality tests. And I know in one test, a woman facilitated us and she wanted us to stand in the corner we belong to. So I went where I belong to. And she said to me, "Oh my God, you're far too male for a woman." And this was the first time that I was like, oh, I didn't even know what she meant. And so I started I need to fit into being a woman. So with my healing journey, I started hard to become a woman. It didn't make sense to me. And I had a phase when I was I would love to live in a male body because I want to know what is the difference, because I didn't sort myself out. So when I moved to Canada, I had done a lot of healing. I had done also because I have experienced sexual abuse, a lot of the stereotypes are, oh, you just don't feel like a woman because you have been sexually abused. And at this stage, I had done enough healing that I knew it's not it. I just don't get it. And so I started hanging out with other trans folks. I started hanging out with non-binary folks. And it really helped me to understand where I am. And it really helped me to embrace that I'm non-binary. So I think most of my life, I have expressed gender to people and the difference, but I didn't use the label. And I was happy when I found the label because I thought it would make my life easier. So when I said to my friend that I'm non-binary, I lost all of them except one, and they all disappeared. And so for me, it was a period when immigration in Canada was really complicated and I lost all my support system. And so at this stage, I became suicidal, and I really needed to remind me of all the trauma healing I had done to get me out of that. And then I also was challenged with how can I be me here in Canada with my values for social justice. For me, I believe in breaking the cycle of violence, whether it's in our family or whether it's systemically. And so I started speaking up a lot when I saw misuse of privilege. And I ran into all the defense mechanisms. So I started to really educate myself. What is culturally, what is there? Why do I get so weird responses? And I started to understand, I started to understand white fragility. And I was also aware that in the end, the behavior itself isn't healthy in relationships. So I found my own way. So I now work as a counselor here. I did a lot of training. So I work with trauma mainly. So I integrate anti-oppressive practices mainly because I think as mental health professionals, we have a responsibility to role model healthy behavior. But I'm also aware that my field in the end isn't committed to it. I also do workshops with white folks or privileged folks around how to navigate privilege healthily, though I'm also very aware about the limitations of the work. So how often it is more like, oh, great workshop, but in the end, it's never applied. I cannot speak for everyone, but I noticed that in this work, assessment and accountability is really complicated. And I thought a lot like, how can I do it in a way that it doesn't get performative? Because I think there comes a lot of responsibility in that. So this is a bit about my story. Highlight.
Well, thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know we've talked about having you on more than once because I believe that your story is multifaceted and important and should not be taken in all at once. So I appreciate you giving us bite-sized pieces that we can all digest first. I did have a couple of questions. I think that we had talked about this before, but hearing it again kind of raised shock in me again. So, being in the States, we hear a lot about Canada offering asylum to our LGBTQ plus community. But then I hear that when I'm hearing your story, I'm hearing that there's some issues there as well. And I mean, that's not to say that I think that every place is perfect, but I guess I just want to clarify, like, what is the environment like there for the LGBTQ community?
From my own lived experience, I would say challenging because it may depend on the intersectionality of the person. Like in
Oh,
the queer community itself, there are power hierarchies. So as a non-binary immigrant, I don't belong to the dominant group. So I'm kind of not fully part of the community, except from some areas where they allow me in. Like some people are very open and others are not at all. I would say, like, my own decision to stay in Canada is I believe Canada is safer than other countries, though I would say transphobia and homophobia and all the others exist here as well. So we face a significant amount of oppression as non-binary folks. Like, I would say, like, finding a job is difficult when you use they, them pronouns. I have met people
uh-huh.
who told me they want to see me dead. Like, so I would say if I don't live in the States, and what I'm hearing from the States, it is quite extreme. So I would say we are not at the same level as in the States. So I would say it may be still safer, but it's also like, it's not all perfect.
Right. Well, absolutely. I mean, to put that on anybody or anything is really unfair to them as well. I mean, nobody, no place is perfect. And I'm glad to hear that the stories there aren't as bad as the ones that we're hearing here. I've been fortunate to my physical friends, my friends in real life. I haven't had to deal with them having any issues in recent time anyway. But a lot of my friends that I've gotten to know in communities online, I hear terrible things, and of course we want to do anything we can to help. Um, So the other question I had for you, right off the top of my head anyway, was you were talking about helping guide people through white privilege. And I just recently came to understand what that meant. I always used to say, I never had white privilege and I don't suffer from white guilt. I did have white privilege. I didn't know what it meant. I found out. And it was actually more beautiful than I thought it was because it's not that you don't suffer, it's that the color of my skin didn't make it worse, which is bad, but in my heart, it made me feel like I understood better. you
Mhm.
know. How, I mean, I found it through self-discovery, and I'm working my way through it with friends and getting to understand how I can use my white privilege to benefit other people that
Mhm.
don't have it. And it was something I was scared to do at first because I didn't want to use it and have people be like, well, it's only because you have white privilege, which it is. I think you understand where my heart's
Mhm.
coming from
Yeah.
here. But how do you guide people and how do they find you to get that guidance?
I guide people, like, honest, I think coming to terms with white privilege and understanding is a profound inner journey. Like, I personally came to it and understood it just because when I was trained in Spain, there was a lot of focus on healthy use of power. And also because I've experienced so much misuse of power in different elements in my own story, I was always like asking me, where do I have power and how do I use it healthily? So I think sometimes the struggle is people reject privilege because they're scared of having power. But the truth is, it's an innate power I have just for being born white. So I think a lot of it came listening to stories from Black people. I was trained in a program that had Indigenous focus. And so just hearing the stories, but hearing the stories wasn't enough, really thinking about what does this tell me about my privilege? Like, I'm aware if I was in organizations as a white person when I spoke up around racism, it might not have been comfortable and maybe it wasn't successful, but I don't have the same repercussion as a Black person or as an Indigenous person or person of color. So I was aware that there are these subtle power dynamics. And so for me, I teach people by, reading them, that they read stories from Black people and then really thinking about what does this tell me about my privilege? What are these experiences I will never have? Because I think I sometimes see it like white women only focus on white men, and there's a lot of anger in, oh, like they have more privilege than I, but they forget to look around and see like, who do I oppress? Um, I participated, I don't know whether you ever heard around the privilege walks. Just because of my own intersectionality, I wouldn't do it again because it was really dysregulating for my nervous system because I'm usually more at the very end. But I think if it's facilitated healthily, like if the people in the front learn to look back and to really think and reflect on it on a continuous level, it can be very useful that they understand, oh my God, there are so many other intersections behind me and I'm not even seeing them. I think for me, the problem always was when I did these trainings where we used the privilege walk, like the people with a lot of privilege continued running and continued doing what they did. And I was kind of stuck in my bag. So I think, but in general, I find them useful. They just need to be facilitated very mindfully because they can be quite dysregulating for people who belong to marginalized communities. But I think for me, it was like when I just noticed, okay, like this is where I am. And if I look back, these are all the intersections that are behind me. So how do I take responsibility for those who I don't see? And how can I educate myself about their experience? And how can I understand my privilege? Does this
Hmm.
make sense?
That's that's very interesting, and it's kind of what I'm doing, just virtually doing that. It's been a fascinating journey to learn the things that I've learned, and the people that I've got to meet, like you, Natalie, have been instrumental because it's opened my mind and my eyes to things that either I didn't know or I had been misled about and just never bothered to follow up on. That I do take responsibility for because I'm an adult. I could have done it much sooner than this. Um,
One thing I want to add, sorry, like there are traits in our culture, like the traits of the culture of white supremacy. So I work a lot with how can we identify the traits, and they are easy traits. It's perfectionism, is my way or the highway. It is black and white thinking, it's lack of systemic thinking. A lot that people reflect on themselves. Where do I see the traits in myself and in the systems I'm part of? And how can I practice the antidotes?
but I think this is. I'm sitting here and I keep thinking about this, and it's never really came filling the words to me before now. I don't think when I was coming to Las Vegas to learn what Teach for America, and I started learning about white supremacy culture anti-racism, and the way I understood it in our school system was it was built into our school system when it was built 200 years ago. It was built into our government when the government was established. But now I'm starting to think that it wasn't just built in then. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to think that my epiphany right now is something I should have realized sooner, but this must have been going on much, much longer, because this goes back to uh, at least before England came to America, at least before England started putting people in Australia. It goes back so much further, and now I understand why it's so hard to untangle it all. It's been happening for so long, and we've blamed different groups at different times, but we've never all come together at the same time and said, we need to untangle this now. This shouldn't be this way anymore.
Yes, like when we look at the dynamics of colonization, like it's ingrained in the dynamics of colonization, like in the core, it's all power over, and one is better than. And I think I learned a lot just sitting down with the German history around the Holocaust. Like, I know the dynamics are very different and countries are different. However, the power structures and the ways of oppression, they are very similar. So I think really when we sit down with history and not just learn it in our brain, but really reflect on it, what does it mean? And, maybe how does it show up in a really subtle way? It gets easier for us to understand it. But like, I agree, like to some degree, misuse of power is extremely normalized in our world. And like this one group is better than the other, it is extremely normalized in our group, in our world.
And it seems it's been that way probably throughout human history, which I'm starting to understand how big this task may really be, and how it really needs to be almost everybody that comes together. And I know that it seems like a daunting task, but it is one that I'm willing to at least take on to start, because if I can't get to the end, we got to start it so that somebody can take it over from there,
Yeah. Like I'm aware that more people would need to do it. And I'm also aware how often nothing happens, but I just bring it back to myself. Like, how can I practice it in my relationships, in the systems I'm part of? Where are my boundaries? And like, how can I be in integrity? And when do I need to say no?
But you're absolutely right. And that's something that I put in when I teach my kids at school is, I know that they're not always going to do what I ask them to. So I set my standards and I set my boundaries, and they know what they are, and they will stay within them. And for me, I do it by modeling. I don't just tell them what to do. I show them what to do. And by doing that, well, I know that it's a better chance, because they've seen it, that they can choose to do the same thing. So
Yes.
looking in at yourself, you're absolutely right. Because if we are exuding what we want, other people can see that and choose to do the same thing. That's beautiful. I love that you said that.
But the truth is, it's also the only thing where we have power to change.
You're also right. Yes. No, you're absolutely right. I joke all the time with my wife that I'm always the big picture guy. I'm always the dreamer, but I need realists, because my dreams can still work, but they have to work within reality. So you're right. Whereas I want to change the world, all I can really change is myself.
Yes, like what I find helpful, there are stages of change for anti-racist practice. I think you can use it for any form of oppression. So there's a difference to work with somebody who's white, who is in denial. Well, they wouldn't work with me, but like I respond to this person differently than to somebody who is kind of ambiguous about change and doesn't know how to do it. Because like if somebody's in denial, the conversation can just be, I agree to disagree. That is your opinion. Because you can't do more, because first they would need to start creating awareness within themselves. If somebody is like, hey, I really would love to do the work, I just don't know how, I can support them to the journey on how they can transform themselves. And deep down, I believe everybody can learn the principles about healthy use of privilege, anti-oppressive practices within 1 to 2 years. Like sometimes we may need to look inside of us just to understand our own experiences where we might be afraid of power or stuff like that. But like to practice it in a reasonable way, I think we can all do it within 2 years.
Well, sure, absolutely. Then that does come down to working on yourself. You've got to do it inside, and the change will happen. I see it in me. I see it in other people. And again, I always refer back to my students because they're so amazing and they're such great examples of what we should be like. In fact, I was just talking about it the other day that people talk about my students are lazy, apathetic, all these other things. And the reality is, and I posted some of their projects. I had to use slides without their names, but I set them up to do a science fair project. And all I told them was you have to pick your own topic, pick your own question, and make your own hypothesis. I have 200 students. I'm not doing it 200 times. So my lazy, apathetic kids started working. They're doing things like how nuclear radiation travels, and they're using the data from Chernobyl. I have another student who's looked up how to make a machine that would take carbon monoxide and methane out of the air, filter it, and produce water, drinking water. My lazy, apathetic kids. And when I tell people about it, I tell them, what I had to do to get them that motivated was tell them to do it. And I knew that they could, and they went and did it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to check their stuff, and I make sure they're doing it correctly, and I help them with questions. But they're so great because they watch what we do. And when I give them a little bit and let them explore on their own, they figure it out. With becoming anti-racist or learning anti-racism, it's very similar because I was given a little bit and then I was allowed to explore. Yeah. And now I still have a lot to learn, but I'm much further along than I would have been if somebody had just been trying to jam it into my face. So yeah. I think you are so right about that too. That's really cool. And I love being able to relay stories that are similar. I've really enjoyed talking to you. There's one other thing I need to let you know. Once we release the season, I'm going to let the fans on Facebook choose one of our guests. And I want to do a Facebook Live, which we would be able to do right from the studio, actually. So if I want to let everybody know, if they choose you, would you be able to do something like that with us? Yeah. That'd be great. I'm so excited about that. Natalie, I'm sorry. I get very excited and hyper. I just love having people come in. I love hearing about them and getting to meet them and talk to them. Sure. And I feel like I've been waiting for this one for a really long time to get in and talk to you and do this interview. I know we talked a little while ago. Mm-hmm. Then I felt like it was forever. You have your own podcast. Would you please tell everybody if, when, where they could find that?
Yes, I have a podcast which is called Trauma Demystified, where I speak about trauma and recovery. Even there, like I try to integrate anti-oppressive practices because I'm aware that many people have experienced systemic trauma, and recovery from systemic trauma often looks a bit different than from childhood trauma. It can be similar, but also different. So, yeah, like if people want to check it out, they can find it, I think, on all the major platforms.
Trauma Demystified.
Yes.
Amazing. You are so amazing. And I can't wait till we get to talk to you again. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say goodbye for me and Natalie from Beyond the Margins. We love you all.